Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about Red-White Heroic in Pioneer. We're going to do a deck tech on it where we talk about each of the cards in the deck, the overall strategy of the deck, and how to play the deck. Jump into it. So this is my Red-White Heroic deck. I'm going to take just a second to organize this. So I divided this deck up into sort of the different categories of the deck. First off, we have the lands. We're also playing a few of the spell lands and Soken's-On, Tajiri Shelter, and Spikefield Hazard. Tajiri Shelter and Spikefield Hazard are both totally reasonable. Having as many spells as possible, even spells that can target our own thing, says any target, can make our creatures bigger and badder and even more powerful. And then Tajiri Shelter being a 2 mana on the front side and also being a land if we really need to on the back side, serves as a land and a slightly worse God's Willing. That being said, the point of the deck is to take these creatures that all have prowess, connive, or heroic, or let you cast things from the graveyard like in Dreadhorde Arcanist, and power them up as much as possible by targeting them with a bunch of stuff. So as far as the heroic cards go, Favorite Hoplite is a 1 mana 1/2 with heroic, where whenever you cast a spell that targets Favorite Hoplite, put a +1/+1 counter on Favorite Hoplite and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. So every time you target it with a spell, it gets bigger on its own, plus the stuff that the spell is doing to it, which we'll get to in just a second. 10th District Legionnaire, nearly the same effect as a 2/2 for 2 mana with haste. And whenever you cast a spell that targets 10th District Legionnaire, put a +1/+1 counter on 10th District Legionnaire and then scry one. So again, it gets bigger and badder the more you target it. Now, Illuminator Virtuoso is a 2 mana 1/1 with double strike. And whenever it becomes the target of a spell you control, it connives. So effectively heroic, it connives. Meaning that you draw a card, discard a card, and you discard a non-land card, put it on +1 counter on Illuminator Virtuoso. So the cool part about this is Illuminator Virtuoso allows us to kind of filter through cards we don't need in our deck, and we don't have a lot of lands, so often we're discarding non-land cards and making Illuminator Virtuoso even bigger, plus what we're targeting with it, and the pumps that these spells are doing, and can really deal a lot of damage totally out of nowhere. Now, we also have Monastery Swiftspear. So Monastery Swiftspear is a 1 mana 1/2 with haste and prowess. It's one of the most aggressive creatures in Magic. And if we're targeting all of our other creatures with spells, Monastery Swiftspear can get even bigger without being targeted by virtue of it having prowess. We also have Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is a 2 mana 1/3 with trample. And when it attacks, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value less than or equal to Dreadhorde Arcanist's power from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell will be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. The cool part about that is every card except for Tajiri Shelter, 1 mana. So even without pumping Dreadhorde Arcanist, we can cast all of our main deck spells a second time, giving us even more reach, pumping even more. Now, on top of that, the other side of the deck, I guess we can call it, are our pump spells. We have Defiant Strike, which is a 1 mana instant where target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and you draw a card. Again, triggering our prowess, triggering our connives, triggering our heroic, all of that stuff. And we get to kind of keep filtering through our deck. Homestead Courage is probably our worst one, but it's a 1 mana sorcery, so that's where it's kind of bad, that they kind of see it coming and easier to 2-for-1 us with it. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, it gains vigilance until end of turn, and flashback for 1 mana, so very good alongside Illuminator Virtuoso, we can discard it and still get value off of it. Monstrous Rage, which is one of the newest additions to the deck that is actually making this deck very, very good and super scary, is a 1 mana instant where target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and create a monster roll token attached to it. Meaning it gets +1/+1 and trample forever, plus the +2/+0 until end of turn, which is just disgusting on any of these cards, maybe besides Dreadhorde Arcanist. Having a forever +1/+1, a +2/+0 at instant speed, so good. And Ancestral Anger is kind of like Defiant Strike, though is it better late game. Is a 1 mana sorcery where target creature gets trample and +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of cards named Ancestral Anger in your graveyard. And then you draw a card. So it's a non-instant Defiant Strike, literally, and gets even better if you have more Ancestral Angers in your graveyard. So we're pumping up our creatures with this, we're triggering the creatures with their abilities, and we're dealing a lot of damage very quickly, sort of out of nowhere for very little mana. Now, the category in the middle here is the interaction in the deck. We have God's Willing, which is really, this deck wouldn't exist without God's Willing, I don't think. It's a 1 mana instant where target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So you can use this in a couple different ways. One cool way you use this, and most of the time you use this as a protection spell. They try to remove your guy, you God's Willing in response, protect them, the removal spell fizzles. But also because it's literally protection, if your opponent only has blockers that are one color, you can preemptively God's Willing something, give it protection from the blockers, like say protection from black if they only have black blockers, and then attack and they can't block, and it's excellent. Because often you rely on chump blocking until you have the removal to be able to deal with the creatures. God's Willing kind of stops that. Ghost Rager's our other piece of interaction, is a 1 mana instant where it deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control and 2 damage to target creature you control. Every single one of these creatures, except for Illuminator Virtuoso, when you target your own creature with it, your own creature will live. You get the +1/+1 counter in 10th District, prowess triggers with Monastery Swift Spear, etc., etc. So this ends up just being a 1 mana trigger prowess / heroic in our creatures, deal 4 damage to an opposing creature, so we can get blockers out of the way and jam for a ton. And so like I said, the point of this deck is to play these creatures, target our guys, remove the blockers, and jam for a ton of damage just out of nowhere. And the deck is so good at doing that. As far as our sideboard goes, our sideboard is here to support our main game plan, not to change our main game plan. Lauren's Escape is just a kind of additional God's Willing, slightly worse God's Willing, but target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible till end of turn, and you scry 1. It's really good against decks with a lot of removal. Destroy Evil is a 2 mana instant where destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater and destroy target enchantment. It's very good against like Shieldred decks or Fable the Mirror Breaker decks and things like that. Rest in Peace is in our sideboard now with the newest popular deck in Pioneer being Blue-Red Phoenix. Also obviously pretty great against Greasefang. Flowstone Infusion is kind of a neat card where it's kind of like Reckless Rage 5 and 6, where 1 mana instant, target creature gets +2/-2 until end of turn. So we side this in against decks that Flowstone Infusion can be a removal spell. But the coolest part about Flowstone Infusion is that if we don't want it as a removal spell, all of our creatures, again, besides Illuminator Virtuoso, will survive a Flowstone Infusion and pump up their power. And so it kind of is a removal spell, but also a really pretty good pump spell as well. Rending Volley, 1 mana instant, spell can't be countered, deals 4 damage to target white or blue creature. Good against white or blue creatures, don't know what else to say. Gigantha, we never side in. It's just an awesome companion because we just naturally have it anyway, just like every Gigantha deck that exists. And then Showdown of the Skalds, my favorite sideboard card, is a 4 mana saga. Its first chapter is exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. And its second and third chapter is whenever you cast a spell this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So you side this in against decks that you think might go long, that interact with you a ton, think like red-black midrange or things like that. Just to dig really deep into your deck, all of your cards cost so little, often you can cast or use all 4 of these cards unless you hit a land pocket. And then its second and third chapter is something we want to be doing in Heroic anyway, and going really tall with a few of our creatures. And that is Red-White Heroic. If you like videos like this and explanations of decks, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description, especially on Discord. Join the community there. Check me out on Twitter where I post stuff about my life, and on Patreon where I post all my sideboard guides and all of that stuff in text form if you're interested, including the decks I'm grinding with every weekend. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.